having a baby today is our hope and prayer for her. So we will miss Representative Wetmore, but nevertheless we have a quorum. Also, we have a large number of members of the House who are not on the subcommittee with us today. Welcome to you all. I will say, standard policy, only members of the subcommittee will be allowed to speak and ask questions as we move forward. However, no prohibition from a member signing up on the sheet to speak should they so choose. We have 4 bills on the agenda today. Because of the outpouring of response to 2 of those bills, I think it prudent to move those 2 bills to the front today so we can get as much as I appreciate when I get recognized for doing something good. Please don't do that. My job today is to make sure we have an orderly, respectful, as I say in these meetings, meeting today. So please, no outbursts of any kind as we work through the testimony and the debate. First, we're going to start with 3643. That is voter registration by party affiliation. That is Representative Brandon Newton's bill. I'm going to give, as is standard course, I'm going to give Standard Policy Representative Newton a chance. But just to briefly summarize, this bill gives residents the option to choose a party when they register to vote. Participation in party primaries is then limited to registrants of the party and those who have remained unaffiliated. The act of voting in a primary will make an unaffiliated voter now a member of that political party. Once registered with the political party, a voter may not participate in another party's primary without changing the registration 45 days in advance. Finally, candidates seeking the nomination of a political party would need to be registered with that party 45 days in advance and have voted in 2 of the 3 most recent statewide primaries of that party in order to file to run. Representative Brandon Newton, thank you. You are recognized to address the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come to you wearing a couple hats today. One is a member of the General Assembly, Assistant Majority Leader, and also as a former party activist, county party chairman, and others. The bill before you is a long path to get here. I want to summarize very quickly. This has been an issue the Republican Party's talked about for years. The goal, as I've always understood it, is to prevent people from playing mischief in each other's primaries. To not allow people who are active members of one party choosing to vote in another party in order to mischief the results. And I think that is an important endeavor that we should look at. A lot of this comes from, you might remember in 2008, 2020, Rush Limbaugh famously had something called Operation Chaos, where he actually actively attempted to get people to vote in the Democratic primary. I do want to point out, obviously in a failing way, because the people he wanted Republicans to vote for did not win. So I think it's worth pointing out that even in a coordinated effort like that, the outcome was not changed. I do want to address some of the parts of the bill. The bill does have to have a lot of changes made to it, partially because some parts of the bill actually already passed the House and other pieces of legislation, dates need to change. But I do want to address some of the more controversial pieces that have come up. I actually had someone apparently show up to my university where I teach at yesterday and go around campus and put stuff on cars and stuff like that. I would say that's over the line, but sadly there are people sitting at this dais who actually had people show up to their churches on Sunday this last year, so I think my offense is a little lower than that. I hate that politics has gotten to that point where people do that and think that's appropriate. Secondly to that, this bill is not about any particular person. I've seen people try to talk about this bill being about supposedly David Pascoe and his campaign for Attorney General. I've never met Mr. Pascoe or spoken to him. And if they believe that this bill is targeting him, I would hate to know why they think so. If it is, it was very much a long-term plan, because this bill passed in Tennessee years ago, and unless the people in Tennessee were trying to stop David Pascoe from running for AG 6 or 7 years later, I don't think that was their target. And secondly, that I think while they were passing that bill, and including while this bill was being drafted in the summer of 2024 with the state party, Mr. Pascoe was still door knocking with James Clyburn, so I don't know if I was supposed to know that he was changing parties or anybody else was. But that is simply not accurate to say, and I do think it was a misstep to make this about one person when it was a party initiative that has been passed in other states. Nextly, I think anybody that has served in the party apparatus, I'm one of those people. I was a party chair, a district chair, an executive committeeman. So my personal Facebook page is still filled with a lot of people who serve on the EC, who have served on the EC, who've been party chairs. And I can say unequivocally that this has been the nastiest debate internally that I've ever witnessed within the party structure. The divide on this topic and the divide between these two pieces of legislation have truly put, I believe, the party into a civil war. And if you're sitting there and you've seen social media, it's been pretty rough. And I've seen members of the executive committee on different sides of this calling each other names, accusing each other of trying to do things, and to me, that is over the line. And then nextly to that, here we are today being asked to step into this debate while also confronting the fact that our governor has said just last week he's vetoing both of these bills and was clear about it. He didn't equivocate. He didn't say, maybe. He was pretty clear. We're also sitting here with a Senate that has never once even considered the topic, has shown zero interest of taking it up. And as the assistant leader and also as someone who wants to be a realist in the legislative process and as the lead sponsor of this bill, I don't think today is the day to do that. I believe that if the party is this divided, it needs to be on the same page. This body and our members should not be placed in the part of trying to create a kumbaya moment between two warring factions within the party. To me, the party needs to unite around one idea, one concept, and agree on it. But asking us to pick between them, I don't think is fair. I do want to address one big difference between the bills that I believe is very important and matters a lot to me, and that is in 3643, the bill allows unaffiliated voters to vote in the primary. That is very important to me. I think that not allowing independents to vote in our primary is detrimental to the Republican Party and our future and our success. Give you some statistics to that. In 2012, 603,000 people voted in the presidential primary that featured Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, and Mitt Romney. In 2016, 4 years later, 740,000 people did that. That's a 23% increase over 4 years in turnout. That increase is what fueled Donald Trump to win that primary. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. I remember standing at the polls that day and seeing people come in there who have never voted in a Republican primary in their life to vote for Donald Trump. Those same people across this country are why he won in 2016. Barring them from having the ability to vote in a primary, I think is wrong. If you want to prevent mischief of people who are active members of one party or the other doing it, I agree. But if your goal is to prevent independent voters from having the opportunity to vote Republican primary, to me, that is a red line that I would never cross or support. Secondly, I think it'd be very dangerous for one party to do it and not the other. I can see a scenario where the Republican Party does not allow independents and the Democratic Party does, and not to give Mr. Bamberg free political advice, but I think if we want to grow the Democratic Party, tell independents that their only way to vote at a primary when they show up to vote that day is a Democratic primary. And so to me, that is a red line in this debate. I do think going forward, if this is a topic that we're going to be asked to take up, knowing there's no way that the bill could be implemented before this election anyway, filing opens in just a couple weeks, and so the ballots have to be set by a certain time for overseas ballots just a couple days after the filing closes, and facing a governor who's promised a veto and a Senate that doesn't care, I don't believe now is the time to move forward two bills that the party does not agree on in any way. If the party wants to do closed primaries, we need to speak with one voice in that debate before asking the General Assembly to get in the middle of an active civil war over two concepts. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I hope that summarizes the bill and states my position on it.
Thank you for your comments. Also, I want to thank you as historically one of the chief architects over your years in the House for someone who has participated in the discussion as we've made changes in how we conduct elections in South Carolina. You've been at the core of that. I go back to what Senator Scott made, his line he made famous, easier to vote, harder to cheat. And I think your efforts have been at the center of that concept over the last number of years here in South Carolina. All right, with that, I want to get on to the public testimony opportunity. We've already had a brief word of caution. Again, my job here is to try and keep this as orderly and respectful as possible, getting as much information from you, the members of the general public, as possible. Having said that, I'm going to go through our sign-up sheets where folks have signed up and told us what bill they're wishing to speak on. I would encourage you, as you can tell, we have a large number of people here, and we want to get to at least multiple pieces of legislation today to be able to talk about. So do your best to limit your comments to the 2 to 3 minute mark. I'm not going to set a clock just yet. We'll see how it goes for a little while. But always, I hear my representative friends laughing. Some of them have signed up and may get a chance to speak, and the rules apply equally, Representative Smith. But if, for instance, you hear a comment and you think that comment thoroughly summarizes what you feel, don't hesitate to say, it's been said, and I support the comments that have already been made as well. So with that, Miss Heather Hickman will lead us off today. Ms. Hickman, if you would approach, and I believe there's a button to press. All right, try it again. Are we green?
Green. Green?
You're recognized.
Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Thank you all for being here. I'll try to be very brief. This is about H3643. This is the Constitutional Laws Subcommittee, so I'm just going to refer to the Constitution. The Supremacy Clause of the Constitution states, acknowledges that this Constitution, our U.S. Constitution, is the supreme law of the land, and I hope we all agree on that one. Further down, and I'm sorry, my electronic died, so I frantically wrote some notes. Further down, that same important, famous document states that no laws may be enacted ex post facto, meaning after the fact. So when you look at this bill, 3643, there is a provision in this bill that requires that candidates must have participated in that party's primary to become an eligible candidate. That is an after-the-fact situation. I recognize that you may not immediately say, well, it's not immediately unconstitutional because, and that's fair, but I think you can agree with me that that opens this bill up to requiring further litigation. I don't think it's wise to go that route with legislation. We have seen this happen before. We've seen legislation passed that failed the test in the state Supreme Court. So I think that makes this a very dangerous bill. It also adds a second topic to the issue of voters in primaries by addressing candidates for election. When I look at that and I look at lawyer legislators, I just have to ask, why would legislators pass a bill that requires lawyers get further involved in it? That doesn't seem to serve the people very well, and I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attendance today. Linda Franklin Moore. Ms. Moore, welcome, and you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the House Committee on the Judiciary, for allowing this public comment. Again, my name is Linda Franklin Moore. I am from Camden, and Mr. Robert Reese is my House member. I'm speaking in opposition to Bill 3643. This bill is nothing more than candidate gatekeeping. According to the South Carolina Party Chair Drew McKissick in his op-ed, he states, when it comes to candidates, parties only have to certify candidates that have registered with that party and have voted in 2 of the last 3 of the party's statewide primaries demonstrating their loyalty. Failing that, the party could decide to grant a waiver if they still want that candidate on their ballot, end of quote. There are at least 19 offices that can be held by 18-year-olds. So under this bill, they would not be allowed to run for those offices until they have voted in the last 2 primaries. This would constitute a violation of state law. The intent of this legislation is to allow parties to decide who can run in primaries. This would limit who would be allowed to run for office. Those making large donations to the parties, would they be the only ones allowed to be certified by the party in question? Candidates who agree to be puppets to the party, would they be the only ones allowed? Voters do not need any political party to tell them or to decide for them who they can vote for, what party they need to belong to, depending upon that vote. This is one of the founding principles of our country. The U.S. even takes action to make sure other countries have free and fair elections. Please do not allow this bill out of committee. Thank you.
Nicole Sanchez.
Members of the subcommittee, guests, thank you for hearing our testimony today. My name is Nicole Sanchez, and I'm the president of Better Ballot South Carolina. I'm here today to speak against both 3310 and 3643 because I believe in the freedom that South Carolina affords. You may have noticed that I don't have the accent. I did in fact come from Pennsylvania, and when I turned 18, I registered to vote. Pennsylvania has closed primaries, so I registered as a Republican. Years later, I moved to this wonderful state, and you know what I discovered? I didn't have to register with a party. South Carolina believes, or at least believed, in freedom. Sure, these bills allow people to switch affiliations, and one even allows independents to vote in either. But when they do, they won't be an independent anymore. That's not something the independents that I've spoken to are comfortable with. Plus, it's an added layer. And when 14% of the population voted in the last primary, why would we freeze out independents? Don't we want greater voter participation? I understand the argument that Republicans should pick Republicans and Democrats should pick Democrats, but then why are they taxpayer-funded elections? Elections are to be fair, free, and open to qualifying citizens who live in the district. If the parties truly want a closed system that further polarizes our population, and closing primaries does further polarize populations, they should fund it themselves and select a convention. This option already exists without wasting taxpayer time and funds on something that disenfranchises a growing portion of the electorate, independents. Then there's the actual cost of this change. Sure, it's just an added box, but how much will adding that box cost to adding it to SC votes, to the DMV registration forms, to the paper forms? How many forms are we throwing away because they're now obsolete? What new connections will the code need? We already had a technical error in 2024 election that disenfranchised a lot of young voters. How much will it take to double check, triple check that code to make sure that everything actually works? How much will it cost to maintain the system? How many new employees are we going to hire for this? And these costs add up. And I will remember them every time I roll over a pothole that we haven't filled because we've spent money on this. To summarize, the option for parties to control who votes in their primary already exists, and it does not come at the expense of taxpayers who would be excluded from the process. Thank you again, and I urge you to vote against these two measures.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. I don't have the accent either, so I don't know. Chad Conley. Come on up, Chad.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Hadn't seen a lot of you in a long time. I really appreciate your service to the state of South Carolina. I'm Chad Conley. I'm former state party chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. And my friend Drew McKissick decided I should come and take the arrows. He had to travel today. And so he volunteered me to come. And since I was home, I told him I'd be happy to. I actually first came here in 2012. As state party chairman, I came and spoke to both the House and the Senate organization and testified about this early on, probably way before even Representative Newton was involved. I think you were county party chairman then. So I'm going to read to you exactly what the state party passed on multiple occasions for resolutions. And in fact, where's Brandon, Representative Newton? This was a unified deal up until just a short period of time ago. Republicans have a constitutional right to freedom of association in regard to House Bill 3643 when it comes to who qualifies to be a candidate, who helps choose the nominees in the primaries. The Supreme Court has affirmed a party's First Amendment right to freedom of association, includes the right to determine who participates in the party primaries. Currently have a system right now where individuals with no demonstrated commitment to Republican principles may vote or even be candidates in our primaries. 3643 closes those loopholes. And we ought to all be excited as South Carolinians because we have grown the turnout in voting capacity from 607,000 in 2012. We ran a presidential preference primary to now we're 700,000 people coming out for a presidential preference primary. That's astronomical. Won't go through the details because in the party's look, this is up to y'all to hammer the details out and to work these things out. I'm sure there are strong opinions both directions, but let me give you a little bit of historical reference that I don't think some people have. Republican Party primary voters have supported partisan voter registration on 4 separate occasions. 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024, with an average approval of 82%, over 1.5 million votes have been cast saying, we like this idea. This is a good thing for the state. And in fact, Republicans and Democrats ought to only want to be represented by people who wear the uniform. It's been in the party platform for literally decades now. This is not a new thing. It wasn't put up for any one person, as somebody just mentioned. It wasn't put up for the current events. This has been in the party platform for decades. Over the past several years, the SCGOP State Executive Committee has passed multiple resolutions supporting closed primaries. And in December 2025, a month ago, just a month, the party was absolutely unified. The State Executive Committee unanimously adopted a resolution supporting House Bill 3643. So we've been discussing this. It's been bandied about in the State House. Like I said, I was here. I met with Greg Delaney in what he called his office, the stairwell. And we had this discussion about how this had a high hill to climb. That was in 2012. I came here and spoke to both the House and the Senate about it and the need for it that far back. Who better to determine who qualifies than the grassroots leaders of the Executive Committee elected at the county level? The state committee has been discussing this for 3 years now in some type of formal matter. The first version of the bill was presented with a generous input from the party, introduced in December 2023, discussed and passed a resolution in favor of it, promoted it extensively to the 2024 session of y'all's legislative session and to the Republican grassroots throughout the state. Introduced again in December 2024, we discussed and passed a resolution in favor of it once again. We promoted it extensively last year in the 2025 session of the legislature and again to Republican grassroots statewide. We passed another resolution in favor of this last month unanimously. There were no resolutions, no motions, no discussions for any other related bills. None have been brought. And unfortunately, I think what we need to do now is hammer some of the details out for the things that aren't palatable to somebody, but it needs to be passed in some form so that y'all can come together and do the will of the people. And also, I just want to cover this because I have heard this represented and misrepresented on talk shows. It's not about any one person. In fact, if y'all pass the bill today or tomorrow, and we know that's not going to happen, everybody agrees, filing closes March 31st. I think it would be super ambitious to think that this would be done by then. That's when filing closes. It won't impact anybody on this election cycle whatsoever. So you can put that to rest, but I believe this law ought to be changed. It ought to be passed in some form. Y'all can hammer out the details among yourselves. I'm sure there's strong opinions. I get all that. I've talked to many of you on the phone, by text, out in the hall just coming in. I know there's a way through this, but we need to make sure Republicans vote in Republican primaries and Democrats vote in the Democrat primaries, and it has been the will of the South Carolina Republican Party, the executive committee. That's the best grassroots representation of every one of you that we could pull together and muster. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Conley. Andrew Boucher.
Hello, my name is Andrew Boucher. I'm the chairman of the Charleston County Republican Party, the largest and fastest growing party organization in the state of South Carolina. Our party strongly supports registration by party and closed primaries. The question is, how do we get there and how do we possibly achieve that? Remind everyone in this room that we are all unaffiliated voters as of today. So how do we get to the point where people are registered by party? And in my opinion, there's only one way to actually achieve that. And that's to have folks who are unaffiliated, everyone in this room, walk into the polling place on election day and choose which party they will continue to be a part of in the future. The alternative is absolute chaos. We spend millions of dollars every year just getting people to show up to vote. And we do a pretty good job in big elections and a not so good job in smaller elections. Now, can you imagine election day for the first primary if we required people to proactively sign an affidavit, return it to their board of elections to say, I would like to vote in the upcoming primary 30 days from now? That election day would see tens of thousands of Republicans or Democrats turned away at the polls. And you would have folks saying, I have voted here my entire life. I voted in every Republican primary. And I'm being turned away because they didn't fill out the paperwork 30 days before. It's an unbelievably impossible lift to get enough people to fill out. I mean, it's hard to get people to show up at the place they voted every 2 years for their entire lives. To get them to also sign an affidavit with an additional deadline 30 days in advance would lead to absolute chaos. I do hope this group hammers something out. But when it comes to the mechanism by which you go from everyone in the state being unaffiliated to people choosing a party to register with, this is 3643 is the only workable approach. It has worked in other states, and it's the best way and the only way to avoid disenfranchising lifelong Republicans or Democrats who show up at the polls on election day, didn't get the memo, didn't sign the affidavit in enough time, and are wondering why they are being thrown out of their own party's primary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Terry Hardesty.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm glad to be here. The last time I was here, I was sitting in that end chair voting for Donald Trump. And the first time I was here, I was sitting in that chair voting for Donald Trump, and some woman was screaming epithets out in the hallway.
Welcome back, and we'll try and limit that this time.
I'm the former chair of Berkeley County. I was the state committeeman for a number of years. I'm the chairman of the Resolutions Party for the South Carolina Republican Party, Resolutions Committee, and we've been working on this for a long time. Since the beginning of the 2013 session, filed in the State House were, not including this session, were 16 bills, all about closed primaries, both in the Senate and the House. They all died a quiet death in committee because they never got out of committee. It is far and above time. We've had several referendums. We've had multiple, 80% of Republican voters are saying we need to close our primaries. And I think that is a right of free association because I recall first district congressional race where we had somebody that was an avowed Bernie Sanders supporter and gladly said so, come and register as a Republican. And the party had to certify him because there's no criteria. So I think, I agree with Andrew Boucher and the registration part of it. It's good. Having to fill out the paperwork beforehand is going to shrink our rolls. We've all in the voter roll, got motor voter to try to get more people registered. And then for them not to be able to vote, that's going to be a disaster. The 2 of 3 rule that we keep talking about actually was passed by our convention in 2022 for party officers. We imposed that on our own party people. That's not a new issue. And I don't think that's going to impact this election, but it impacts who can be called a Republican, and we ought to be able as a party to say, you know, you look like a strong Republican. And if you don't meet that criteria, you file an appeal, and the executive committee will hear it, about 50 people. We want people in, not out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sherry White.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair,
Welcome.
other committee members. Thank you for hearing from us today. I have been preceded by other well-spoken people who have gone over the history of our party and how we represent this. My name is Sherry White. I'm the former chair of Sumter County Republican Party. I'm the current EC. I've been the 5th District Chair as well. This has been on our radar for as long as I've been involved, which goes all the way back to 2011. I am an OG grassroots person. And actually, when I started, I didn't believe in closed primaries, but have since changed my mind and understand the importance of that. It's important that you hear what the population has to say. Closing our primaries should be a no-brainer, and it is. The citizens of South Carolina who affiliate with a particular party should be the ones deciding who represents that party in a primary. Today, I speak as a very conservative member of the party. And for nearly 2 decades, I've listened to the majority of our party, those active and voters who are not politically active, that they want Republicans running as Republicans. And why are we letting people who aren't Republicans run as Republicans? Well, as was previously stated, we have no choice. If Jim Clyburn walks in the office to file to run for governor as a Republican, right now, we must certify him. That is wrong. And we need safeguards against that as well as other things. So we've had no choice heretofore. H3643 places the burden on the candidate and not the party to demonstrate commitment to a party's principles through participation in the party's primaries. The party's role is limited to granting a waiver if it so chooses. Therefore, we are not in control of who the candidate is. The burden is with the candidate. The problems with registration are fixed by 3643 in a fair and fiscally responsible manner. It was addressed before, the cost of registering by party. Well, in the next primary election, if this law is in place, when I go to vote in the primary and I vote for a Republican, it costs not one more dime that I am now registered as a Republican than it did when I voted in the last primary. Any new registered voter still has to register and they'll check a box. There are forms. Okay, I'll grant you that. Limited expense in that manner. H3643, registration by party, is organic and easy. Implementation is much less easy with 3310. We would have endless lines with people signing oaths. And if you have to sign it 30 days before, that problem has already been addressed. Anyone, they talk about the 2 of 3 requirement, and if you're 18, you can't run for office. Sure you can. If you want to run for office and you're 18, 19, 20, and you've not had the opportunity to vote in a primary, you want to be a candidate for office, you should be able to articulate to anyone, party leaders and the general public, why you want to hold this office as a Republican. You should already be able to do that if you've decided to be a candidate. Therefore, what's the problem in talking to the party and requesting that waiver? You should already be able to articulate your reasons if you want to be a candidate. I've been a candidate. Before I decided to run, I knew why, I knew my reasons, I knew my positions. And I could say them to anybody that asked. So asking for that waiver, I don't care how old you are, you should be able to articulate your reasons for wanting to hold that office with that particular party affiliation. In closing, if we want to be genuine and hold to our party platform of being socially and fiscally responsible and conservative, and have elected officials who do the same, 3643 is the only bill that checks all those boxes. Thank you.
Mike Lyons.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Mike Lyons. I live in Mount Pleasant. I'm a member of the Charleston County Republican Party Executive Committee. Prior to moving here 5 years ago, I was active for several decades in government in the state of Connecticut, which has had closed primaries since the year I was born, 1955. I urge the committee to move forward with efforts to close the primaries in South Carolina. You have two bills before you, each of which would move the state in that direction. Each has some good points. I think a compromise between them is where you need to end up. But as a person who was involved in the Connecticut Republican Party at the time of a lawsuit titled Taschin versus Connecticut Republican Party, I wanted to bring your attention the holdings in that case, which is cited as 479 U.S. 208. This is a decision of the United States Supreme Court written by Thurgood Marshall. In that case, the state of Connecticut was trying to compel the Republican Party. The state was deciding who could vote in the Republican Party primaries. The Republican Party sued the state, won the case at the Supreme Court, which ruled that a party has a First Amendment protected right of free association to determine who can and who cannot vote in its primaries. The fundamental ruling is that a state cannot force a party to decide who's going to vote in its primaries. The party gets to make that decision. And any statute that denies it, that's the point. According to the U.S. Supreme Court, the party gets to decide who can vote in the party's primaries, not the state. Our current system, in which the state requires political parties to let non-partiers vote in their primaries, is unconstitutional, according to the Taschin decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. It is therefore time for this state to move forward and do something to end its current unconstitutional practice and recognize the First Amendment rights of its political parties to decide who can vote primaries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have, I'm not sure, Tyler Dykes. Mr. Dykes, are you speaking on 3643 or 3310?
Am I able to speak on both?
Well, I'm focusing on 3643, but I do agree with you. The subject matter kind of is interconnected, so to that extent.
I'll speak on this one if that's fine
Sure.
with you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Tyler Dykes. I'm a January 6 pardoned patriot, was pardoned by President Trump, and now I'm running for Congress. One of the main reasons why I oppose this bill is because if passed, obviously many people say that it's not going to pass this session, but pretending it did, it would ban not only myself and David Pascoe from being able to run for office, but very many large other numbers of people in this state who sacrificed their lives and were incarcerated to fight against the rigged elections that were happening in 2020. And so during that time, I was fighting against the law system and defending myself in courts, and I was unable to vote in those party primaries. And so as such, if this bill passes, I would be banned and not allowed to run for Congress to represent CD1, the low country area of our state. Additionally, if you look at the statistics, almost nobody actually shows up for the party primaries. You got 10% of the people actually show up for one of the primaries. Generally speaking, the average person will show up to one primary and will show up to the general election, and that's it. And so what ends up actually happens when you have this requirement of you have to have two people or you have to vote twice in these primaries, you're actually knocking out 95, 96% of the people from being able to participate and run for office. Now, I served in the United States Marine Corps, and let me tell you, when I was in the desert of 29 Palms, California, voting in the South Carolina primary was not at the top of my agenda. Learning how airplanes worked and how to shoot them out of the sky was at the top of my agenda. And so this bill actually is discriminating against our military members who finish their active duty service, decide once they get out that they want to run for office, and they can't. Not only that, but it is also discriminating against my entire generation of Gen Z, I myself being the oldest of that cohort. And we would be pretty much banned for 3 or 4 years after hitting 18 years old from being able to run for office. And so my biggest issue with this bill isn't that it's closing the primaries. I think if you look around here at the grassroots support, you'll find everybody wants a closed primary. The biggest issue that I have with this bill, as do many of the people behind me, is that it is deciding who gets to run for office. And that should be left up to the people to decide who we want to vote for. Additionally, with the exceptions clause that is in this law, it allows not the party members, but the leadership of the state party, who are not elected officials serving in the state house, they will get to be the ones who give exceptions to this. Now, many military members and business owners and a lot of people that are busy and are the great candidates that we want to run for office, they don't show up to primaries because they're too busy running their lives. They're too busy doing things that are good for the country. And so fundamentally what this law does is it takes power out of the hands of the people, it takes power out of the hands of the people that would be good candidates and puts it into the arms of the people that are not our elected representatives, but that run the state party, many of whom people have accused them of being corrupt and not representing the actual interest of the American people. And so it is for this reason that I'm completely and totally opposed to this bill and in support of 3310. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're doing good. Every time we have to have any kind of an outburst, I've got to stop, and we take time away from everyone's ability to speak. So just a cautionary reminder, again, we've been doing great, team, as far as respecting and not slowing us down. Next up, Jim Olmos. Welcome, and you're recognized.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, committee members, for having this. You got a good turnout in spite of cold weather. I'm gonna tell you, I'm Jim Ulmer. I'm the chairman of the Orangeburg County Republican Party, and I get mail from North South Carolina. And so you know how fun that is. And don't mention that Bill Cosby Club. I've never heard that accent anywhere else in my life. But anyway, thank you for having this. It's cold weather outside, but I'm gonna tell you a hot weather story. My daddy talked about when he was a kid, he went down to Smokes to his uncle's farm, and it was hot, and he played with his cousins or did a little bit of stuff on the farm. It was real hot. Anyway, it got sweaty. You know how kids do in South Carolina and in the heat. Anyway, they loaded up the wagon or whatever and went to the uncle's store, and they had a chest, kind of like, you know, some of you old people know this, old like me and older than me. Young people have no clue what I'm fixing to tell you. But anyway, Cokes used to be in glass bottles and in a red chest where you had to come through a little maze to get them out. Well, anyway, he said, so his uncle bought him a Coke, and it was in one of those little bottles, and he said he took the top off, and he said it was full of those little flakes of ice. It was nice and cold, and it was hot outside, and they were about to die from the heat. He said he threw it back, took a swig, burned the snot out of his nose. I mean, I'm sorry about that, but anyway, burned the burned his nose. Have y'all ever had a Coke like that? All right. He said that was the most refreshing Coke he ever had up to that time. And so the rest of his life, he said, I'm looking for a Coke like that. And you know what? I like a Coke like that. Now, my mama, when I was a kid, she packed doggone Winn-Dixie Czech Colas in my lunch to go to school. I hate Czech Cola. I don't want a Pepsi. I don't want an RC. I want a Coke that burns my nose. Well, I tell you all that to say we need to have candidates who are true Republicans. We need candidates who are true Democrats. That will give us elected officials who are true Republicans, and that will give us elected officials who are true Democrats. And that will make for better government. We had, let's see, in a recent June primary, I think we have about 437,000 voters in that primary, voting in the Republican side. In the last presidential preference primary, and I sat next to Mr. Hardesty right there a couple of times voting for Donald Trump myself as an elector. We had about 750,000 voters in that primary. We need registration by party in South Carolina. We've been trying to get it for over 20 years, maybe longer than that, because I remember we talked about it in a committee when the Republican Party headquarters was on Lady Street across from Ken Wingate's office behind what used to be the Clarion Townhouse Hotel. So that was a long time ago. Bill H3643 will do this seamlessly. A voter will be able to walk in unaffiliated, as every voter is in South Carolina today. Somebody mentioned that earlier. They'll be asked to choose to vote in the Democrat or Republican primary in June, and then they can walk out with just a click of a button by an election poll worker to register them as a Democrat or a Republican. They won't have to go to the voter registration office ahead of time. As a county party chairman, I have people get in touch with me weeks after the election is over and say, Jim, aren't we going to have an election sometime soon? Yeah, we had one a couple of weeks ago. You missed it. Remember, some time back, there's a video on the ETV website, or maybe the legislature online website of, let's see, my Senator Brad Hutto and seemed like Phil Levinas and somebody else talking about Indians in their pictures or whatever with the photo ID. Well, guess what? That was a mess. You know, folks couldn't, their excuse was he was talking about the Indian would not want his picture made because his image would be captured and his soul would be tied up or whatever. And anyway, another argument against it was, they have difficulty getting to the polls. Well, guess what? If you have to go to the voter registration office, if you have difficulty getting there for a photo ID, guess what? You're going to have difficulty also getting there to change your party affiliation or even register. H3310 is better than nothing, but it has unintended consequences. Folks won't hear about registration beforehand and will walk into their precinct, like Mr. Boucher said, that they've been voting in all their lives, and they'll be ticked off when they're turned away and go home. And guess who they're going to call? They're going to call y'all. And we won't have 750,000, even 437,000. We'll only have a fraction of those numbers. Be real. Be classic. Please send H3643 to the floor and pass it. And unintended consequences have bitten us before. You remember when recently, a few years back, when about 1,400, both Republicans and Democrats, got knocked off the ballot because of a technicality about filing forms. You know, that was a nasty little thing. I'm sure a lot of y'all remember it. Be real, be classic. Please send H3643 to the floor and pass it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right. Next up, Representative Mark Smith. You can keep your seat since you're there, but thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members, for adjusting the agenda today so we could get directly to these bills that are clearly most important on everyone's mind that's here. I want to set the record straight and make sure everyone understands that from my perspective, I'm currently on both bills. Because why? I want to see South Carolina finally respond to what we've heard here several times, closing our primaries and that request by the overwhelming majority of our constituents for almost 20 years. It is time for us to do our job. I have concerns with parts of each of the bills. Neither bill is perfect in their current state. But as all of us, most of us up here understand, bills can be amended. Few bills start out the process and end up exactly as they're written. That is the beautiful thing about our process. And another thing is that sometimes there are legislators like me who will actually put their names as a primary sponsor of a bill because constituents or people will come forward and say their voices have been silenced and they can't even get a bill heard. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to vote or you support that bill, because we as legislators have the right to vote green or red on every bill, regardless if we're the primary sponsor of it or a co-sponsor of the bill. But what it does say to the constituents out there, you matter. Your voice can be heard, and I will fight for the little man or the little woman or the little person. As I mentioned, I got concerns with both of them, and it's interesting throughout this process, as mentioned earlier, we have seen social media and email and things blow over these issues, which isn't, and we've seen a lot of false information be put out there. In fact, I've been publicly called out on stating my position on a bill that is factually inaccurate. Oddly enough, I was never even contacted, directly or indirectly, by the person calling me out on social media. But I digress and will end there. Everyone has the right, bless their heart, to voice their opinions. I believe in the democratic process and letting the voters decide. And I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that we get a bill across the finish line this session. It is time. And will go a step further. I am sick and tired of hearing, well, we know we can't do that because the Senate won't pass it, or the governor's gonna veto it. Guess what, folks? I, along with my colleagues up here, was represented to represent the House of Representatives, to do our jobs. Let's get a bill passed. Let's fight for the person. And I pledge and support anyone who's announced to run in this election cycle. I'll fight tooth and nail to make sure your name's on the ballot, to make sure the voters decide who they want to represent them. That's what makes this country great. I'll end there and just want to thank you. And please, I encourage you, members, I don't care which bill we move from this subcommittee to full committee to get it to the floor, but let's get a bill, because right now, only committee members can offer amendments. On the floor, 124 people can offer amendments. Let our voices be heard, and at the end of the day, when the primaries are over, let the best man or woman win. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Representative Smith illustrates a point. These two bills, we're on 3643 right now. However, 3310, I have folks that have signed up to speak coming up in the list. And obviously, we're talking about the same subject matter. I do think so that those members of the subcommittee could get a full flavor of what we're talking about exactly. Representative Burns, you're here. 3310, I believe you're the primary sponsor of 3310. Is that correct? Would you mind giving us just a brief summary, as Representative Newton did, on his bill? And again, I think this is just a good pause point for us to do that. And then as I move forward with the list, I can allow the 3310 folks to speak as well.
Sure, I think that's a great idea. Thank you. Chad Conley mentioned earlier that when he was party chair, he was going around the state advocating. In 2012. I signed up to run in late 2012 and was elected in 2013, early in a special election. And I believe the very first bill I filed was this bill to close the primaries. It was a big deal then. It's remained a big deal, but it's been hung up in different subcommittees, and I thank you for hearing this bill now, finally. And I'm sorry that it's turned into the unpardonable divide, but people have different opinions. And my opinion is that we should have a cleaner bill, and to make that crystal clear that only Republicans elect Republicans and only Democrats elect Democrats. I don't think that the electorate out there wants crossover people coming in and polluting the ideas of the Republican Party. This closing the primary issue has been a platform issue for some time. And, it's kind of reminiscent of a board of directors in a restaurant chain, for instance. And let's say that Burger King is trying to hire a new CEO. And it would kind of be foolish to let people from Cracker Barrel board directors come in and help vote to elect the CEO for Burger King. And that's what we're doing. And we had a great example in Greenville this December 23rd of crossover, where we had a great crossover effort in Greenville for one of our sitting members now, who only won by 20 votes. And social media was blown up in Greenville, imploring the Democrats to cross over and elect the more moderate candidate. And it almost happened within 20 votes. And so we sit here today, and we've sat here for years trying to get a bill like this heard. I guess my best aim today, I would like to see both bills passed out, and let's get it to the floor and let's figure out what the people really want. And I agree with what Representative Smith said. I don't give a hoot about what the Senate wants to do or not. We need to speak on the issue. We were elected by our people to speak on this issue. And if the governor decides, we can, there'll be a lot of pressure on the governor if it gets passed through both chambers. So that might take care of itself also. So, there are great similarities. I'm a co-sponsor on 3643. It would make us if we had independents or non-affiliated crossing over instead of both Democrats and unaffiliated crossover. And I'd finish with this. Back a generation ago, some of you, my good friend Howell Clyburn was the last minority leader in the Republican Party. He was the first majority leader. And he can tell you instances where the Republicans crossed over to pollute the Democrat vote back when they were in charge. So, there's a lot interweaving in this. I appreciate you all hearing this today. I want to stop now because I don't want to rob the people of the time. But thank you so much for hearing 3310, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. With that, Leah Williams.
Thank you for hearing these bills, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak on both of them. My major concern, there's only 2 states in the United States that do not register by party, and South Carolina is one of them. And to me, the most important thing here is registering by party. And you have to start with that to close primaries. But it's even more important down the line when we're out campaigning for our people to know who in our community actually is a Republican, not because they voted in a primary, because as has been said before, only 10% of the people vote in the primary. So it's a very poor ability for us to identify our people that have Republican principles. I do not like House Bill 3643 because of the 2 primary rule. They used that in our Republican Party and threw out good officers last year that were voted by the majority of the Republican conventions because of that 2 primary rule. And not only did they not, the problem was that even the people that they threw out, they actually voted in 2 primaries, but the statistics that came out from the office was not accurate, and people had evidence that they voted in 2 primaries, and so they had to go through some kind of committee, and these committees just flat out said no. And so there's a problem with allowing the state to control who gets to run by that kind of thing. So if you pass 3643, I would challenge you to take out that 2 primary rule because it's not good for the people. The people don't get the people in office that they need. And for 3310, registering by party is the primary thing and I think it's a simple, straightforward bill. The hiccup is the very first time that we do it, and put amendment in there and say that anybody that voted in the Republican Party in the past automatically gets registered as a Republican. You know, the state can do it. They know who voted in the primary. If you want to say just the most recent, you automatically. Now, if you're a Democrat and you don't want to be in the Republican, give them an opportunity to change it. That would affect only a very small percentage. So that would cure the problem with the first time chaos, because anytime you have change, it takes a while to get that in order. So a simple amendment that just says anybody that voted in a Republican primary is automatically registered as a Republican. They will show up to vote, and then they can tell them at that time. And as far as registering for a Republican, they send out our cards all the time when you guys make bill changes, and they just send us and say, you're in a new district, or you're in this, or you're in that. It's just it's a computer thing, and you can send it out to all the Republicans. You could send it out to all of the officers and say, you have to vote now. So that should be taken care of. You have to register by parties. And so I don't think that's the issue. But to me, the most important thing you need to do is allow us to register by party, even if it's just volunteer. I don't care. We need to be able to know who our fellow Republicans are, and that's what's required here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Leslie Menard?
Hello, Leslie Minard. I'm speaking on behalf of the Green Party. Unless I really screw up, then I'm speaking for myself. Thank you for having us here today. So I am the first person here who's not a Democrat or a Republican, and everything here seems kind of black and white, like you make this one decision or you make this other decision. I have voted for Republicans. I have voted for Democrats. I actually know somebody who voted for Bernie or voted for Bernie in the primary and then eventually voted for Trump. Those people exist. We are like the 3%, and it's not good necessarily to discount us. I'm still getting yelled at for the, when Bush beat Gore. That's my fault some reason, somehow, because Nader won by Nader had a 3% margin. And I don't think that's why Bush won, but I'm going to still be blamed for that. And I feel like both of these bills are not good for grassroots or third parties. And, you know, in 11 states, third parties are basically illegal. And I feel like voter turnout is a thing that could easily diminish because people are really disenfranchised and unhappy with what's going on with the two major parties. I'm not saying it's you guys, but, you know, the guys up at the top, a lot of people I know feel like they're controlled by the oligarch or they're controlled by big money interests. And I saw this statistic. Currently, 73% of voting age adults are registered to vote in the U.S. That means a quarter of us are not. Of them, 68% voted in the 24 election. In total, that's only 58% of the voting age adults voted. So that's a slight majority, but not much. By comparison, Germany, in the 2025 election, which voting is not mandatory, it is in some countries, had an 82% voter turnout. And one of the reasons I feel, and other people do, is it's got a multi-party system, and it encourages people and energizes people to get out and vote. But this bill, which I haven't heard anybody talk about this, and I have a question, it says there's going to be filing fees, and I've seen some predictions of what the filing fees would be, because third-party candidates cannot pay a gigantic, like Jill Stein, hopefully she's not running again, don't tell her I said that. But anyway, if she was to be running for president on the ballot in South Carolina, I saw a number, she might have to pay $20,000, I mean, or $10,000 to run for U.S. Senate. I don't know what the numbers are, but there is a filing fee which could make it prohibitive for other grassroots people or third-party people to be on the ballot. So for that reason alone, I and my other third-party friends oppose this. Though I do want to thank South Carolina General Assembly for keeping, we have a pretty decent open ballot in South Carolina, and people around the country are proud of us. So I think we need to keep it open for everybody. Yeah, my question too is, would I, like if I have voted Democrat, I've voted Republican, what primary would I vote in? Like if I showed up somewhere, they'd say, oh, last time you did this, or all the, you know, the 3% of us who are card-carrying members of Libertarian Party or the Constitution Party. So if we don't even come to vote in the primaries, that's, we consider the unaffiliated, you guys don't know the answer to that. Well, anyway, because the author's not here. Yes, and I ditto what Tyler from January 6th said. Thank you for having me, and please, let's keep it open for the grassroots and those of us who don't necessarily identify as one or the other, because there are a bunch of us out there, and I think we're growing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Jean Griffin.
Thank you very much. I'm the State Executive Committee man with the, from Greenwood County. I'm also on the Resolutions Committee with Terry Hardesty, and I have seen how many resolutions in the last several years have been presented by county parties supporting closing the elections. I'm not going to repeat everything that Chad Connolly and Andrew Boucher said, but they've already said it, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Dennis Brown.
I'd like to thank this committee for this opportunity. My name is Dennis Brown. I serve as the State Executive Committeeman for Charleston County. And I know you have a lot of people who want to speak on 3643 and 3310, so I'm going to keep it real brief for you. I would like to offer my support for Bill 3643. I have many reasons for doing so, but for the sake of time, I will offer only my two main reasons. Number one, implementation. Implementation of Bill 3310 would cause undue hardship, confusion, and voter alienation when it came time to vote in our primaries. No matter how much education you do, you will have voters showing up not understanding, and they'll be turned away at the polls. In 2022, I served as a campaign chairman for a congressional race in a redistrict area. And no matter how much we did, I had people call me up saying I showed up, I couldn't vote. They just didn't understand the process. As many of you in this room, I've heard a lot of Governor McMaster's speeches. And one of his main themes is, what does the Constitution say? To be clear, I'm not a lawyer, but I did my research. When I looked at the Constitution, what I found as far as political parties controlling their primary system, I found nothing. However, the United States Supreme Court has a lot to say about closed primaries. And I found no less than 5 cases, and in each case, it has ruled in the favor of the political party to restrict participation in their nomination process, with the common thread of the political parties are protected under the First and 14th Amendment. To be clear, again, I am not a lawyer. I just did a little research. Now, passing a bill is great, but what I'm looking for is law. I'm looking just to get it memorialized into law, and Governor McMaster has offered us a lot. He's been a terrific governor, but he has stated that he will veto this. And so I guess I find myself on the other side of this issue from our governor. Which means we're going to have to use our supermajority to get to where we need to be. So I ask you to give Bill 3643 an affirmative vote, as I believe it is the only bill that'll get us one step closer to making this law in South Carolina. Thank you very much.
Beverly Owensby.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan and the committee for allowing us to speak today. I am speaking in support of 3643. I'm a board member of the South Carolina Federation of Republican Women. And we looked at this last year, and we did pass it at our board meeting, passed the resolution to support this bill. And so we hope that you will also pass it out of committee. It is past time. It's unbelievable that in South Carolina, when it's put out to the voters on whether or not you think a certain thing should happen in South Carolina, it doesn't. It stops at the State House. And I think that you have an opportunity to change that today. And I hope that you will pass this out of committee. And then, hopefully it will get to the floor. And certainly, if you already know that the Senate's saying one thing or the governor's saying another, you need to listen to the people and what the voters are wanting change, and hopefully that can happen today. I think that this bill does two important things. It does close the primary, and it should have been closed a long, long time ago. Why? Or would anyone allow someone from another political party to vote in yours? They're choosing who your candidate's going to be. And the primary is where we have to eliminate and try to get to the best candidate. And so we really don't have that opportunity in South Carolina. So we have, in the case, I'm a Republican, we have Democrats crossing over. They're choosing our candidate. And generally, that's not the most conservative candidate. I'm a conservative, and I believe in the Constitution. I believe in less government, more freedom. That's what I'm about. And I think everybody in this room is. They want to see that. And so, and what happens, also on 3310, I feel like that we do need to have perimeters. Because if we're just going to say, oh, well, anyone can come up and say, I want to run for office, even though I haven't voted or shown that I have a true interest in being a voting Republican. Why would we allow anyone to do that? Because we need to vet that person. They need to show that they are a Republican, they're interested in the party and what the party stands for. So I think there's two very important things that are in this bill, and I hope you will pass them. You have an opportunity to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, can't read the second letter. Appears to be Lyous. Okay, all right. Okay. That's not Lyons, but okay. Mamie Rand. Ms. Rand, welcome, and you're recognized.
Thank you, members of the subcommittee. My name is Mamie Rand, and I live in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Representative Landing is my representative. And I am here to speak on one aspect of House Bill 3643, and it has to do with the 2 out of 3 rule. So the state party has representatives here, and we have lots of local GOP leaders here, chairmen, who have all spoken. And what I would like to bring to everyone's attention is the state party failed many individuals, county delegates, to our Charleston County Republican Party convention just in April. We had 495 individuals at a convention. They were all there to be chosen as state delegates, 70 delegates, 70 alternates. And do you know that 95 on that 495 list did not pass that rule? They did not pass the rule that the state party required. And the state party let that slide. The chairman of my party let that slide. And many members of my party, of my local party, let that slide. And so how on earth, if we can't do that in one county, how on earth are we going to do that in 46 counties? And I would say that 3643 is riddled with issues and needs to be dropped. Thank you for your time.
Katie DiTilio.
Almost fallen over there, sorry. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Katie DiTilio, and I am Senior Legislative Affairs Associate for the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network, or WREN. At WREN, we advocate, educate, and convene in community and service to women and girls in South Carolina. WREN urges you to reject these bills because they would shrink participation in the elections that matter the most. WREN exists to empower women and girls in South Carolina to shape their lives free from economic and reproductive barriers. These issues are inseparable. Without financial stability, people's choices narrow. Without access to holistic reproductive care, economic independence becomes harder to achieve. But none of this is possible without political power. The ability to secure fair wages, safe workplaces, affordable childcare, healthcare access, and bodily autonomy depends on whether communities can meaningfully influence who governs. Election rules are the infrastructure of freedom. In too many districts, the general election outcome is effectively decided long before November. As a result, the primary is often the election where a voter's power is the greatest. When a state limits access to primaries, it limits access to meaningful representation. That matters for everyone, but it is particularly consequential for women, people of color, and the working families whose well-being is directly shaped by policy decisions. These bills would create new hurdles to participation by restricting or conditioning access based on party affiliation and forcing voters to adopt a party identity to cast a meaningful vote. This change would reshape whose voices are heard at the ballot box. South Carolina has a growing number of voters who are unaffiliated, independent, or unwilling to claim a party label. They are still citizens. They still pay taxes. They are still governed by the decisions made here. They deserve full participation in the elections that shape their lives. South Carolina's most urgent primary problem is participation. Turnout is consistently low, leaving a small slice of the electorate determining leadership for everyone. We should work on expanding participation and strengthening civic engagement, not imposing new restrictions that make voting harder and discourage involvement. We respectfully ask you to oppose both 3310 and 3643. They would restrict meaningful voting in elections where voters have the most power and would further distort representation in a state where competitive elections are already too rare. If we want a stronger state, we should be working to bring more people into the process, not pushing them out. Economic justice and reproductive freedom require political power, and political power requires full and fair access to the ballot. Thank you.
Courtney Thomas. No? All right. Cheryl Hanhart Beck. That's a quick trip.
Good afternoon, and thank you for letting us speak. My name is Cheryl Hanhart Beck. I am just an ordinary citizen, newly relocated to South Carolina in August of 2020. I have voted in, this is my fourth state, and it is the first time that I am realizing I am not a registered Republican because nobody in South Carolina is a registered Republican. I am in support of 3310 because I've come to realize it's horrific when I've watched Democrats cross the line and vote for the worst candidate in presidential primaries, and when I've seen flyers put out by the Democrat Party encouraging their people to do this. In every other state, you had to register for a party in order to vote in the primary. As the gentleman on my left so eloquently put it, why in the world would Burger King ask PepsiCo or some other company to come in and help them pick a CEO? I believe that a registered Republican who says, this is who I am, these are my beliefs, should have the benefit and the privilege of helping select our governing people. That doesn't mean that other people who want to buy stock in Burger King can't have some sort of a say, but just like having citizenship to the United States entitles you to the privilege of voting, I think citizenship in a Republican Party should be a requirement to vote for the people. You can change your identity as often as you want in all these other states. I have friends that every year seem to register for one party or the other because they hate this one, love that one. So I would say, whatever you do, South Carolina, and I come from an area which is an awful lot of transplants with my accent, we're used to picking a lane and staying in it. I think when you say closed primaries, my friends say, great, they don't understand you're allowing the many unwashed, undecided, uneducated, they don't pay attention to the elections. So you're allowing our primaries to be polluted. So I would say, please, whatever you do, at this next election, when you ask for a Republican ballot, somebody at that poll should put an X next to your name with an R, so that you then become a registered, legal citizen of the Republican Party. Thank you.
Tom, starts with a W. Y-Star?
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for hearing me. It's Wistar. My name's Tom Wistar from Sunset. You may have gotten a note or two from me over the last couple days. They often say, read the room. We've been at this an awful long time. I've heard estimates from 13 years up to 20 years that this has been going on for an awful long time. It's time that we move this down the road and get this done one way or the other. I think, and I'll tell you the way I think, in the last general election, it was a ballot measure. And if you remember, it was over 90% in a general election decided to close the primaries, who voted yes, close the primaries. That's called a hint. We want the primaries closed, so we got to get something out of here, but I'll tell you why I'm thinking about 3310. There's two issues with 3310. The first one is that loophole, that 2 out of 3. This brave veteran Marine behind me wouldn't be able to serve his country again as he's asking to. I think that's absolutely criminal. I also have heard Congressman Newton talk about anger. That's just simply frustration. People are active. This is part of the process. Sometimes it gets a little loud. Democracy can be loud. The other issue with 3643 is the unaffiliated. Let's not kid ourselves. Republicans need to vote in Republican primaries. Democrats vote in Democrats. I would really urge you to pass 3310 out of committee, and let's get it over to the Senate. I've talked to different senators. They're on board. They're like, send it on over. Let's get this done. We've been at this way too long. Thank you for your time.
Dan Harbin.
Committee members, I'm Dan Harvell. I'm from Anderson County. I think I'm represented by one of the greatest representatives. I know he's a freshman, but that's Lee Gilreath. I'm sorry he's not in here right now. I'm so proud to have him representing me down here, as well as Ms. Cromer, Mr. Beach, and the others that represent us in Anderson County. I'm not new to this. I've been around for a long time. I was first elected to town council when I was in my early 20s, and I'll be 69 on Saturday. So it's been a long road. I would actually quit politics by now because I'm kind of tired of all the
divisiveness and all that we encounter, but I can't because I've got 5 dear grandchildren whose futures rely on what we all do now. And we are at a crisis point right now. Now, to start with, I'll have to disagree respectfully with Representative Newton. When he started out, he said there was a civil war within the state Republican Party. Well, I've been on the state executive committee for about 15 years now, and yeah, we've had a lot of differences over the time, but that's not a civil war. When a minority, which I'm usually a member of, goes against what would be called normally the establishment, it's not a civil war. It's a discussion. It's a difference of opinion. So please don't think that we're about to fall apart as a Republican Party based on that comment, okay? I'm absolutely for closed primaries. But let me tell you, several years ago, we had some rifts within the party, and we had what I would call an emergency closed, not closed, but an emergency out-of-cycle convention where our party rules were changed in many ways. One of those ways was the 2 out of 3 requirement. That 2 out of 3 requirement has caused us a lot of problems in our reorganization process and those that can participate in the local party and up through the county conventions and the state convention. The records from the South Carolina Election Commission obviously are not very accurate. We've had a lot of people come that have voted, and we know they have. Their names were not listed as having done so, and it was just a lot of problem. I also have a problem with thinking about, and even though I would be one of the voting members on the committee that would make the decision of up and down as to whether or not we're going to allow some candidate a waiver, I don't want to be in that place. I want a bill that's put forth, and I think 3310 is a good start, although I think it needs some amendments. I don't think 3310 is necessarily the answer. But I trust that you all, as good South Carolinians that want the best for the general public, I think you'll work it out. But please, close our primaries and let Republicans be Republicans, Democrats be Democrats, and quit this crossover thing that's really messing up some of the decisions that are made as who's going to run in the general election. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and happy early birthday. Lynn Teague.
Thank you very much for hearing me today. I have submitted written testimony, so I can keep this really brief. The League of Women Voters of South Carolina opposes both of these bills. The League has a 105-year history of working to get informed voters to the polls. And one of the conspicuous features of South Carolina is that many of the elections are not generally competitive in November, barring unusual circumstances. And that makes the primaries extremely important for determining how we will be governed and who has a voice in how we're governed. We believe that the primaries should be open for that reason, and we believe that independents, who are a growing part of the electorate, should not be excluded. And we understand that there is a lot of controversy about how this would be handled or if this would be done at all. But we respectfully request that you do not forward this bill with a favorable recommendation at this time. Thank you.
Colonel Chris Hemsel. I was leaning Hemsel versus Heimsel, so thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me. I'm Chris Hemsel. I'm a retired Army colonel, having spent 30 years on active duty, and now make Columbia my home as a choice, not by birth. Today, I'm speaking to you on behalf of Veterans for All Voters South Carolina, a nonpartisan, nonprofit grassroots organization fighting for responsible government, accountable politicians, civility, and a more perfect union through open and competitive elections. We highly recommend voting no to close South Carolina's primaries. This committee has better options before it. While on active duty, I was an intelligence officer, and it was my duty to speak truth to power. So that's what you will hear today. Closed primaries, or partisan primaries, do three things: disenfranchises voters, empowers entrenched political parties, and increases polarization, which all leads to poor politics and worse governance. Over 50% of all veterans identify as independent voters, and the number as high as 59% for our post 9/11 veterans, our Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z veterans. We have roughly 390,000 veterans here in South Carolina. Closed primaries could disenfranchise 195,000 service members that swore to support and defend the Constitution, not political parties. Closing South Carolina's primaries sends a message to all South Carolinians. We do not care what you think, what you want. We only care about what the party leadership and its major donors want. And that is exactly what party leaders want: no competition and total control. Political parties are about power and not governance. Closed primaries makes it easier for party leaders and billionaire activists to threaten candidates and incumbents to toe the party line, or not to be supported, or to be primaried. If it were not for gerrymandered districts, closed primaries give crossover voters the exact outcome they're looking for: unelectable candidates. These candidates and politicians have no incentive to find win-win solutions for all the people, but instead they play a zero-sum game partisan politics, leading to the greater polarization in politics and society writ large. This polarized political climate creates political gridlock, unless of course you have a uniparty controlling all branches of government, erodes democracy, fosters misinformation, encourages hostility, turning neighbors and members of the other party into the enemy, and reduces civic engagement. But you all know that. You live it every day. Closed primaries exacerbate the problem. One final thought. The U.S. Constitution, the Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, which every service member swears to support and defend, deliberately denies a role for parties or factions in the base document and in all of its amendments. In fact, our founding fathers warned us about empowering political parties. President Washington, in his farewell address, states, and I quote, "However, combinations or association of the above description," speaking of political parties, "may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominions." Veterans for All voters, South Carolina humbly requests you vote no on closing our primaries. Listen to President Washington and do not cede any more power of the people to the parties. Thank you.
Dylan Gunnels. And I will say, so I'm trying my best to give everybody an opportunity to speak. We are running out of time. We are rule bound to finish at 2 o'clock and still have 4 more folks signed up to speak. No pressure, Mr. Gunnels, but you're recognized.
I spend too much time here. I'll take the pressure. My name is Dylan Gunnels. I serve as the Advocacy and Organizing Director at Be the Ones. We are a South Carolina-based nonpartisan civic engagement organization. I'm here in opposition to H3643. I think we've talked a lot about individuals and parties today, and I'd like to talk more about the fiscal and logistical hurdles of closing South Carolina's primaries and instituting partisan voter registration. It's important to mention at the outset that no state in recent history has moved from nonpartisan voter registration to partisan voter registration. This bill proposes such a shift without the level of study, planning, or fiscal analysis that a change of this magnitude requires. If primaries are closed in South Carolina, the practice practical effect is that the entire registered voter population, which is, by the way, over 3.3 million people, would need to re-register, either with a political party or as an unaffiliated elector. Nowhere in this bill is there a plan for how that would occur, how long it would take, or how much it would cost. The administrative costs alone are substantial. Statewide voter education campaigns, expanded registration sites, additional staff and training, printing and postage, technology upgrades, system maintenance, coordination with DMV and NVRA agencies, and on and on. None of these costs are addressed in the bill, nor is the explanation of how such a system would be implemented, coordinated, and sustained at state and county levels. In Section 1, it says, does the new 45-day party affiliation registration requirement change South Carolina's current 30-day registration deadline? Would this new deadline only apply to primaries or also change registration deadlines for general and special elections? Also, what constitutes written confirmation of party affiliation change? Is it online, digital, or in person? The last thing I'll point out is that we do appreciate the inclusion of Section 6, requiring the State Election Commission to establish a voter education program, but the bill provides no guidance on what the program entails, how it will be implemented, additional key deadlines, or how it will be funded. Without dedicated funding and realistic timelines, this is unworkable. While portions of the bill may merit discussion, H3643 as written reflects, in our opinion, a lack of understanding of how elections are administered in practice in South Carolina, and without serious study and some real questions of the funding and the process, we respectfully ask that you oppose H3643, and I will offer, of course, that we feel the same about H3310. I will offer very quickly, I know that we're not here for that, but we do support S38 and would love to chat about that later. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we hope that you'll vote now.
Thank you. Mark Lynch. Mr. Lynch, give me your best 2 minutes.
Yes, so I'm Mark Lynch, and I'm running for the United States Senate. Bill Chumley's my House representative in District 35, and I appreciate y'all hearing us today and having a chance to speak. It's insane that we don't have closed primaries. I think the majority of the people are here for that. We have to have registration by party. We're trying to work together in the Republican Party, and there's so much division because the majority of the Republicans are not Republicans, and we see that through the Freedom Index when we see how people decide to vote constitutionally, and we publish that record. And one of the hardest things for me running for the United States Senate is I'm battling is the Republican Party because they're not Republicans. And they want to keep open primaries. That's how they continue to get elected. And they have failing voting history. And so we're all asking to unify the party. You know, we need to close the primaries and force voter registration, and people need to do their civic duty in the country. And if they have to pick a party, they'll probably get educated before they vote, and they'll know what they're doing, and they'll actually support the party that their political agenda aligns with. So we have to do that. When we go out and we get I-360 software or L2 software, a lot of those doors we knock is like, I wouldn't vote for you. I'm a Democrat, because it's based on the last primary they voted in. So as a successful businessman of 40 years, being debt-free, running for this office in a serious way, putting $5 million of my own money into this campaign, I'm very serious about changing things. And we've got to close the primaries and have registration by party and get this done. And I agree, it's going to be a hard thing, but one thing is we got to have gates. In our business, we have gates that are uncompromisable. So I know it'll be hard to do. We've got to educate the public. We got to get the voters to come and register. We'll figure that out, but we cannot have a closed primary without party registration. We can't let that kill that part of the 3310 bill that I support. We can figure that out. We can go to speed, get y'all to work hard on it and focus on this bill, and get the amendment to sharpen it and get it right and finish it, and let's get it passed. It's time. That way we could have people, when we look at the Republican Party and we try to run this in the state house or at the federal level, we won't have all the bickering and fighting inside, creating a uniparty, wondering why nobody can get together on anything because we've got enemies inside the party that aren't Republicans. It's crazy. And in our business, I would say the same thing Mike Burns said. I wouldn't have a board meeting with people from Lowe's coming into our board meeting, helping me decide how to do things in my company because they don't work for me. That would be crazy. So I appreciate the time. I appreciate what y'all are doing. I thank all the people coming here and having a voice to speak to y'all, to our employees that we elected. And I thank you for your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm again reminded that how important this is to the process. And I want to thank all of you for coming out today. This is not the first time this subcommittee has had to deal with such important issues. And this is a major shift in policy here in South Carolina. I'm confronted by several things as I've heard from Republican Party officials, I've heard from activists, I've heard from folks who call themselves regular citizens. And what I've heard passion, but I've also heard agreement that there's disagreement. And if this issue is going to be successful, if we're going to go from sentiment to policy, which is I think where we're stuck right now, we're stuck with how we shape a sentiment into a policy. And if we're going to create policy that is right and stands up to court testing and survives and is what everyone in South Carolina can look to and say is legally sound and correct, we've still got a ways to go is what I'm hearing today and what I've come to understand. It does mean something to me that the governor is against this issue because that makes it harder to take it from sentiment to policy. It does mean something that we have not heard from Senate leadership, that they're not gearing up to take on the issue. I've heard from my colleagues also in the House another concern that we're going to have to wrestle with, a serious concern amongst the body is if we're going to change and allow independents and unaffiliated voters not to participate, but also demanding that all taxpayers foot the bill, then we're going to have to wrestle with that issue too. So I don't want anyone to be discouraged. One of the realities that I heard today was no matter what happens, if we were to do something today, it would not be possible to put this into law for purposes of, I believe it would be, I won't say impossible, but nearly impossible for it to go from, again, sentiment to this election that we have looming before us in the very, very near future. What I think needs to happen is the folks I just listed, the elected officials, the party officials, the regular folks, we need to continue that discussion. Mr. Burns and Mr. Newton need to continue the discussion of, can we take some of the things that I think I heard today that folks agree with in 3643, and can we take some of the things in 3310, and can we create something that, again, goes from sentiment to policy that can ultimately pass through the State House and get the governor's signature. So again, not that we're done with this. I think we're just getting started, perhaps, with the discussion. So with that, it is past 2 o'clock. The House is in session under our own rules. We are prohibited from taking any action. We have received a tremendous amount of information as to both pieces of legislation that we will take with us and continue to study. And I welcome you to continue to send written comments so that we can continue to wrestle with this issue. Having said that, we're hereby adjourned.
We'll have everybody exit to your right.